So, my name is Martin O'Millior. Welcome back to the Lagan Stream podcast. I'm joined today by Michael McAdam of Movie House fame. Michael is a friend of anyone who ever goes to one of his many cinemas right across the north. But my favourite was always Dublin Road, and he's going to tell us why that's no longer there. And he's branched into many other aspects of work. But first of all, Michael, you're our first speaker from Rathcoole at the West Belfast Small Roundtable, which will take place in Unculterland on the 5th of August, where you've been many times. And there's only 14 tickets, so I'm sort of hoping, Michael, that you'll do what everyone else. Tell us a little bit about growing up. You're a child, really, of the 60s, 70s in Belfast, difficult time. Tell us a bit about your own background.
Yeah, so I was born and bred in Rathcoole Estate, and we were the lower end of Rathcoole, which we always say was the posh area, and certainly the friendliest area. I mean, we had our bonfires and everything else, as you did at the 12th of July, and but we lived together, Marcy. We had quite a few Catholic neighbours, who were friends, and we really didn't know. I mean, as a young boy, I didn't know the difference between Protestants and Catholics. To tell you the truth, I actually thought the Catholics drank Dale farm milk and the Protestants had the co-op because our neighbours had the heart sink at Dale Farm, and so I was totally oblivious to all of the nonsense and all of the horror that was to come along. It was a very happy childhood as well. We lived in flats on Ardmillan Drive. And my parents, my dad was a postman. Mum worked for service washing machines, and life was as good as life could be.
And have you kept any of those friendships from those formative years in Rathcoole and North Belfast?
Yes, there's still a few. I mean, of my closest friends, yes, I would keep in contact with them, and funny enough. See, it was 1973 I got my first cine camera, and BBC did a series a few years ago, well, quite a few years ago now, because my wee mum was in it, was alive then, and it was Super 8 movies, Super 8 stories, and we featured the first one. And some of my friends in that, I'm thinking of one particular who I see on the Dublin train, Eddie Campbell. We mightn't keep in contact, but we see each other, and we often talk about the fact that we tried to make that particular first day when I got my camera, him and Thomas Tinsley and I was directing them playing cowboys and jumping off coal shed roofs and so on. And I have other friends who, yes, I do keep in contact with. Stephen Saunders still does a lot of graphic work for me, for Movie House. My other friend, Johnny, we have to laugh whenever we talk to Johnny, because when I phone him, I always say, nobody's dead. I'm just on for a chat, because you tend to find these days that the conversations you get from people are, you'll never guess who's just passed away.
So tell us about your entrepreneurial journey, because we've had some wonderful speakers in our series at the West Belfast Small Business Roundtable. And we haven't had a speaker yet, even though they're all eminent Belfast entrepreneurs like yourself, we haven't had a speaker yet who says, went to school, did my A levels, went to university and did an MBA. And you're the same. You didn't go through that.
No. The thing was, education didn't really do it for me. I mean, I ended up leaving school with CSE, a double award CSE in English. I had an O level in woodwork and in art, and that was it. Because you see, I was always working. I always had a dream. I was always ambitious. I had an interest in photography, but I was terrible at it. Um, I had mobile disco equipment. It seemed to be to me that every time I wanted to, if I went out to a disco, I wanted to be the DJ. If I went to a theatre, I wanted to work on the lights. If I went to the cinema, I wanted to be the guy in the projection room. I mean, that's just how it always was for me. And to tell you the truth, it hasn't changed today. I'm still the exact same.
There's something in that, hard work. Tina McKenzie met, as you said, when she went to London. Every job no one else wanted to do, she would do. So where did you get that desire to work hard and to stay active? Is that part of your upbringing, do you think?
Well, I mean, my dad was a postman, as I say, and I always remember he would come home soaking wet. His area was up in Ballyduff, and he would come home and totally soaking at 9:45 in the morning, and mum would have a whole new change of clothes for him because he would go out again to do overtime.
Wow.
Because if while the young lads who had phoned in sick, I mean, his mates got up that morning, looked outside the window, oh man, I'm not going out today. So he would be doing their job basically. So my father always had this great this creative way of if you want to get a few more pounds, then you've got to work for it. And for me, well, I always had dreams, and I say to young people these days, if you don't have a dream or an ambition, then you've nothing to live for. You've nothing to work for. I bought a house when I was 20, and I hadn't two pennies to my name.
What did it cost?
Well, it was 18,250. I still drive by it when I'm in Carrickfergus. I was one of the very first people to buy a house under the co-ownership scheme. And of course, years later, I was able to pay all of that dirt back. But I mean, at that stage, so I was working in Ulster Television at that time, and
Well,
I
tell
had
us
got,
about that, Michael. Tell us about because you didn't go to university then.
no, I didn't, no.
But you had this love of films and movies and TV. So how did you keep that dream alive? Tell us how your career kicked off.
Well, look, I've always been very lucky. I worked in a cinema, the Grove Theatre, when I was 14. I never got a wage packet off them until I was 15 and a half. So I used to go up there, and I had two great influencers there. Paddy Reid was the projectionist, and another lovely old man called Tommy McAllister. And Tommy would take over from Paddy whenever Paddy was on holiday. And Tommy was a lovely old man, and I remember him saying to me as I was turning 16, "What are you going to do for a career?" At that stage, cinemas were closing down. I mean, we're talking about the pre-multiplexes, the time when you had the Kirsten and the ABC, and that was it. And and he suggested to me, he says, I think you'd like to work in television. And up until the moment that Tommy said that, I had no idea, no dream. And luckily enough, as it would have it, the Grove had a bar, and one of our customers in the bar worked in the film library in UTV. He arranged for me to go in to see George Shields. Got one of the young lads to show me around, and that moment I knew that's what I wanted to do. And for the next 4 years, I phoned the personnel department every week,
Wow.
always looking for an opportunity. Attended interview after interview after interview. And of course, looking back in that, I mean, my dad saying, now you dress up for this. And I'm not going to change. Oh, I'm going to wear an open neck shirt, and I'm not going to get. 4 years later, I was wearing a suit and tie. And I remember the personnel man saying to me, Michael, you're looking really well. Before I finally got it. So, I've always discovered that. Well, first, and I say this to my own kids too. First of all, you've got to have a dream. You've got to have ambition. You've got to have push. You've got to be able to pick yourself off the floor. You've got to believe in yourself, because if you do not believe in yourself, then why should I? And it's only by pushing forward and pushing forward that people look at you in the way they hadn't looked at you the first time they met you, to decide you must be the real thing because you keep coming back.
Tell us about that dream because I think at all some stage all of us when we went to the movies as kids. I remember going to see Rob Roy and then going to see Oliver Twist, like the magic of movies. But what was your dream in relation to it? Or did you know what it was? Or were you just fascinated by moving images and TV?
I just love the idea of entertaining people. I love the idea. I remember in my little cinema in Portrush, one Saturday afternoon, a young family coming out. Well, the mummy wasn't there, but the daddy walked out with three wee kids. And they looked up to their daddy and they went, Daddy, that was really, really great, wasn't it? And the buzz and the kick that I got out of knowing that, I had provided the venue for the entertainment. I mean, I would love to be an entertainer. I would love to be a singer, but that's not going to happen. So I've discovered that even all the big stars, they need people in the back lines. There's always somebody. I mean, no matter how big the star is, there's a producer behind that person. There's an agent behind that person who makes the opportunities for them. And I suppose for me, that's the way it's been in my life, where I've been given this. I don't know. I mean, I call it a gift. My mummy used to say, "You're not gifted, son. You were blessed," and as mummies will do. And I think she was kind of right. Are you lucky in life? Well, I certainly have been lucky. Certainly have been. But
What was that gift? What was that gift? The gift of what? Being inquisitive, being driven?
Yeah, I think of just being, of not taking no, of having self belief, of a certain determination where everybody else goes, oh, that's not for me, I'm just not going to do it. Where I don't, I just keep finding another way, because there's always another way around the back or in the side or over the roof, under the floor. I mean, you just got to find the way that works for you. And the fact is that, when you overcome the first hurdle, then all of a sudden people start to look at you in a different way. I always remember my accountant saying to me, we'd opened up the cinema in Yorkgate, and I was organising I had a meeting with Ulsterbus, and the deal was I was asked them would they drive the buses into Yorkgate and do a turn so that people along the Shore Road and Monkstown and Rathcoole, that was my memory from the Grove. And I remember my accountant saying to me he said, did you go to the meeting? And I says, yes. And he says, well, how did you go there? And I says, in my car. And he says, you're very old, cropped out Ford Capri. And I went, yes, I was quite hurt. He says, you can't do that anymore. And I says, what do you mean? He says, you can't present yourself in that way. And I said, but Peter, that's a nonsense. I mean, I go in a pair of jeans. He says, a pair of jeans is acceptable. He said, but I'm telling you, you can't do that. And he insisted that we went out, and I got my first Audi. It was a lovely car. And I thought he was talking nonsense until a young man came along one day to sell me some chemicals on a Friday afternoon, and he was drenched to the skin. He looked like he'd had a terrible week. And I bought a few boxes of whatever, and he drove away in a battered Morris Marina. And I remember thinking, if I'd have seen his car before he arrived, I wouldn't have gone down to see him. And Peter's words came back to me. So I'm saying all this in the fact that when you have reached a certain pinnacle, once you get over that initial hurdle, of please listen to me, then people start to listen to you. Peter always, and I count and I speak highly of Peter Driven, because only for Peter I would still be working in Ulster Television probably. But it the self belief is very, very important, and it's difficult. It's so difficult for everybody, because those who love you the most are the ones who will try to protect you. And they don't want, and it's not that they don't want you to succeed. They're terrified of you failing. And so therefore they will block every way you go. And it's so difficult when like of me, I mean, going and borrowing, as it turned out, I mean, millions of pounds. I mean, at one stage I owed AIB 13.5 million. And, that's a lot. And you come, I would drive by my cinemas, and sometimes even when I walk in early in the morning, I go, I actually own this, and when it is, it's a weird feeling. It really is.
Now, bring me back, because tell us the story of the first cinema, which I think was Portrush, and then deciding to leave UTV, because that's leaving a fixed wage is absolutely amazing point for any entrepreneur. So tell us that story.
So, 12th of July 1987, my girlfriend at the time, later to be my wife, Valerie, we were up in Portrush, and the old Playhouse cinema was all locked up. But there was an amusement arcade below it. And from the amusement arcade, there were glass doors that led to the cinema. So I was peering through these doors, and one of the engineers, the guys who look after the amusement machines, he said, "Are you interested in the cinema?" I told them all about my background, and I couldn't believe that a cinema in Portrush wasn't open. He organised for me to meet the owners. We took a walk around this closed down cinema, popcorn containers, Coke containers, all on the floor from the night 4.5 years before when it closed. I brought a good friend of mine, George Rowan, who was one of the cinema managers, had just been made redundant, and we formed a partnership. I borrowed 100 quid from Valerie's mommy to stock the shop, and we opened the cinema on a 10-week deal. A handshake. We kept it going for the first year. Then George, the driving to Portrush every single day from Bangor, I've obviously killed George. George and I went our separate ways. I took over. And all of a sudden, I'm still working for Ulster Television, but I have it at the cinema. And the frustration I was feeling with UTV was I wasn't going to go anywhere. But now I'm talking to Warner Brothers, I'm talking to United Pictures International, I'm talking to 20th Century Fox. I'm telling them my dreams and ideas and how I'm going to promote things. And they're listening to me. Now, they were probably laughing a bit too, to be honest with you, who's this young lad coming in here, you know. But those dreams led to the cinema in Glengormley. And I remember I was driving down Rothcool Estate on my Ford Capri that I love so much with my car phone. Do you remember those? Not a mobile, but actually a car phone. And I was down Rothcool Drive, and Peter, my accountant, phoned up. This is when we'd opened Glengormley. And he says, we've got the first quarter's accounts. And I went, great. How do they look? And he says, they look fabulous. And I says, really, Peter? He says, yes. He says, you've just achieved the first year's projected profit in the first 3 months.
Wow.
It just took off. And we're sitting talking one day, and then the opportunity came to do Yorkgate. And I had the cinema in Portrush. I had Glengormley opened. We were building Yorkgate. I was still working away on UTV, and I just couldn't do anymore. And but in the early days, my concern was that the venture wouldn't work. I was concerned that, you know, that I mean, I had a house which I sold. So when I moved out of a beautiful, beautiful house that I had built, I invested all £60,000 of the profit. Valerie was now pregnant with her first child. We moved into a rented house that the builder had given us. But I still kept my job in UTV. And the basis was that if the cinema failed, well, I had no idea how I was going to pay the bank back. But the fact was I could still produce an income. And I kept that going for 2.5 years before I had the confidence to say, no, the company can now, you know, can support me and all that I need. But, you know, the difficulty with that, Margin, was the fact that having been part of a team of maybe 14 people in studio, now there was me in the office at 9 o'clock in the morning at a cinema that was not working because Yorkgate was not working to begin with. You're owing the bank 2.5 million at this stage, and you have to make it work. And when your back is to the wall, you've only one way to go, and that's up. And you have to think and you dream up ideas and ambitions and competitions. Because I knew I had a good product, but I knew I needed to get people in to taste the product. And the difficulty was, given Yorkgate's position at that time, was the fact that you had Tigers Bay on one side, you had the New Lodge on the other. And in fact, the first people to come to the cinema were people in their BMWs and their Mercedes Benz, because the security was so good and the security was visible. And people, when you've got a big car, you know, when you see people, security men walking about, it makes you feel very, very good. I know these days we're all back to cameras and somebody's watching it, whatever. Not the same as it actually being seen.
What year was Citygate? Because you actually went
So Yorkgate
yeah,
was
that's right.
93. Yeah, 93.
Well, that was a really tough year. Like,
Yeah.
had a lot of terrible years, but that was a damn tough year. And you went right into what was that horrible term interface.
Yeah.
Why did you feel confident that you could build a cinema in Yorkgate that people would go to it, that when the city was so
Instinct. I can tell you the moment I had walked on where our current box office is, when I walked on that floor with the centre manager, Ken McAdam, I just knew it would work. I just knew there's this gut instinct. When I was opening Glengormley and I had to bring in investors in, and I was having difficulty doing that in the early days, I would get up at 1 o'clock in the morning, drive to where the cinema currently is, and I would just walk about it and go, I'm right. And I remember one day there was Bellbone Furniture had just moved out and there was a door open, and I'm walking around this empty warehouse at 1:30 in the morning and I'm going, I know I'm right. I can't, I don't know why,
and you
but
felt
there's an instinct
that,
there which is
you
there.
felt that in Yorkgate as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
When did
Absolutely.
Dublin,
And that,
when did Dublin Road open?
so Dublin Road opened in 93 as well, and it was opened by MGM Cinemas. And we knew they were coming to town. And in fact, in order to blow me out of the water, they took a full page advert in the Belfast Telegraph when it was the broadsheet, saying the big MGM crest, saying the Lions coming to Belfast. And I was negotiating at this stage for Yorkgate, and I went to Yorkgate and I said, we were open 6 months in advance of them. I said, there's no point in doing it, you know. So we actually got the whole deal pulled together very, very quickly. And that's another thing I'd like to say to people as well. You know, I've found in life, you know, you have to bring in experts. I mean, I can't negotiate deals. I'm only the dreamer, you know, but you bring in key people to look after you. But even your key people can fall out. And we ended up with that all the toys were out of the pram. Yorkie wasn't going to happen. And then the centre manager contacted me one day and he says, will you come back and have a discussion? And I says, no. But I will go to Manchester because Yorkie was owned by the Co-op Wholesale Society. They were the biggest landowners in the UK at that time. And I said, I'll go if we can go and talk to somebody who can make a decision. We had a deal done inside 40 minutes of sitting down. And I'm saying this to people, there are so many people and so many obstacles in the way. If you can get talking to the decision maker, you may not get the answer you want, but at least you'll get the answer and you'll put it to bed.
Let me just ask, I'm going to finish with this, and we'll have a longer discussion on the 5th of August at 8 o'clock in the morning and opportunity for questions. But making deals is very important to people. So I want you to finish. I don't want you to breach any confidences, but you ended up selling Dublin Road.
Yes.
It hasn't really developed. How
Yep.
difficult a deal was that? I was sad to see that cinema go, but it was absolutely the right decision. And you've done many other things. But tell us just a little bit about that deal, if you can.
No, I will. And I mean, the thing is, everything about that deal, the site was bought by Keynos. They're the public limited company. They're on the stock exchange, so there's nothing hidden about it. I never wanted to sell that site. I never wanted to sell it.
How
It
did
was a
you end up
beautiful
owning it?
cinema.
How did you end up owning the MGM's operations? Sorry.
Okay. Well. So I was out at a trade show in Amsterdam, and I sat beside a lady called Margaret Taylor, and Margaret she was a Dublin lady, and Margaret was the managing director of Virgin Cinemas as it was then, and then became UGC. And we had a few drinks in the bar. Well, actually, probably had quite a few drinks in the bar. And on the way out, I said to her, "Sell me your cinema in Belfast." And she went, "Yes, okay." And I says, "How much do you want?" And she told me, and I said, "She'll take a bit less." And she turned to me and she says, "No, I will not, and it's worth every penny." So when I came back, I tried to phone her, and she wouldn't take my call. So I wrote to her, and her head of property came to Belfast, and once again, talking to key people, we shook hands within an hour, and I took over that cinema. And I loved that cinema. I remember driving along with my daughter and her friend, just as Signfleur were changing taking down the UGC sign and putting up a movie house. And
What
actually
was that?
going in and,
What year was that? What year
oh, now you're going to hit me for
when you bought?
uh,
Okay.
2003, 2005.
So City's starting to get on its feet. City's starting to get on its feet a bit. But
And Dublin Road, we had admissions were just down to the low 400s, and the cinema was tired. It was a first generation multiplex, and I remember within 2 weeks of owning it, a lady wrote to me and she said how disappointed she was, because it was a movie house after all, and the standards were not up to what she was used to. And I thought, well, listen, let me get my feet through the door. And then we did a complete refurb job. We reseated everywhere. We recarpeted. We put in new shops. We got the admissions back up to 650,000. So, I mean, it was flying. I mean, it was doing really, really well. I was in competition with myself, if you want. But over the years, then, the Odyssey had come along at that stage. Lisburn had opened. Then, the pie began to get cut up into smaller slices. Dublin Road started getting to be a little bit seedy. And I was at a dilemma where I needed to spend probably 2 million in order to bring the site up the SPAC when we were approached by one of our commercial estate agents, and it was put to us that somebody wanted to pay a lot of money for the site, and we ended up all falling out, as you often do. And I decided it's not for sale, and I went ahead and the morning that it was agreed for sale, I had just ordered all the carpets, and I had been in with seating plans to put in the new reclining seats that I put across your circuit now. When my accountant friend Peter phoned me up and he said, "It's gone." And I said, "What do you mean it's gone?" He says, "It's gone." And I says, "Who's bought it?" He says, "I can't tell you at this stage." And I said, and what's the price? And the price was 7,050,000. And I wouldn't sell it for a penny less.
Well,
And
let me just say this. That's a great deal for Keanos as well. I'm very proud of them. They're a great Belfast Indigenous
yeah,
company from Queens and done great work for the city. They got a good deal. You got a good deal. Um, I want to finish. I want to give you one last word. You started out talking. You're always. I don't want to call it hustling, but you're always working, and you're always committed. But you're also very positive. So I just want to ask you, how positive are you for the future of the city? You're still deeply invested right across the north, but how do you see the next 10, 20 years working out for the city? Because you come through terrible times, like horrific times. And there are real challenges, I think, especially for big employers like yourself. But how do you see how do you see the future of Belfast? And I'm trying to step outside your own business. How do you see the future of the city?
well, without investment, everything will fall apart. And I just don't mean Belfast, I mean in general. My success has been that we have constantly reinvested in the business. We've listened by going to trade shows across the world, by listening and seeing what different trends there are, and being the first on many occasions, because within Movie House, we introduced salted popcorn to Northern Ireland. We introduced nachos, which are available everywhere, all by traveling to go and see. So to really answer your question, to anybody out there involved with business, no matter what it is, whether it's manufacturing or whether it's leisure, what I'm doing, if you're not investing, first of all, your competitor probably is, and so therefore, when you have competition coming out, and of course, what a lot of local companies in Northern Ireland have found, as I had to find out to my cost, is when the big boys come in from across the water, sometimes they don't even have to make money. Sometimes they're there for market share. How do you fight market share? Because I can't borrow money on market share. I have to borrow money and be able to pay it back. So how do I see things going? Well, within my business, the cinema has constantly remarketed itself. It has found itself from having 2,000 seats in the cinema to having multiple screens like we have, where even our new seating capacities have gone down by 40% because we've introduced more luxurious seating and so on. And so long as everybody else, should it be in retail or whatever, are doing the same thing, then there will be a great future for everybody. But if you don't invest, it's just not going to happen.
Well, look, let's leave it like that because that's a good lesson for everybody. It's a lesson for the politicians, for the private businesses, for the small businesses, for the international companies that are here. And it's investing in community and in people and investing in the future. So, Michael, I want to just I want to finish now by thanking you for your sponsorship over 27 years of the League Awards, which recently the Community Awards and the Culture Awards, because that's also been the League Awards are an investment in community and recognition and spotlight and so on. So I appreciate that. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to have this online on Spotify and all the other platforms shortly. I'm looking forward to you coming in to the West on the 5th of August, and we'll have a really engaged group of some of them are very young entrepreneurs, and I think you'll find them as energetic as yourself, even if they're only starting out the very.
Wonderful. Well, I look forward to that, Martin. I look forward to seeing you then.
Well, listen, enjoy the break, and I'll see you then. I'm going to stop the recording. You don't need to go away just yet, but fantastic. Thanks.